President Biden and his Secretary of Homeland Security named the biggest threat facing America right now. No, it's not China. No, it's not the wide open border and the drug cartels. And no, it's not even Russia. Here's what they claim is the biggest threat to America right now.
The most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy. And I'm not saying this because I'm at a black HBCU.
You know, in the terrorism context, domestic violent extremism is our greatest threat right now. Individuals driven to violence because of ideologies of hate, anti-government sentiments, false narratives, personal grievances.
Yeah, I'm perplexed as well. Joining me right now is Newsweek opinion editor, the host of the Josh Hammer podcast, Josh Hammer. Josh, your reaction to the president and the Homeland Security Secretary saying that it is white supremacy as the #1 threat in terms of terrorism to America.
Maria, I mean, this is just profoundly cynical stuff. I mean, you know, Joe Biden might be claiming that he is not saying this because he is speaking at a Howard University commencement speech, but he obviously is saying it precisely because he is speaking at a Howard University commencement speech. In many ways, his decision to kind of give this line in front of a historical black university on their commencement day is kind of more broadly indicative of the broader kind of Democratic Party strategy, which is basically to kind of just do this intersectional coalition where you go into kind of various racial, ethnic, national identity, minority groups and try to just give crumbs. They're basically just trying to give crumbs to various perceived aggrieved interest groups in the run up to the 2024 presidential election. And, you know, if you're Joe Biden and you're looking at the polling, you know, it probably actually makes some degree of sense. So, you know, a shockingly high percentage of Democrats say that they are not enthusiastic about Joe Biden's reelection bid. A shockingly high percentage of Democrats say they simply do not want Joe Biden to run for re-election. But if you go back to the 2020 Democratic Party primaries, it was actually black voters, especially in South Carolina in the third in the nation primary, that actually saved Joe Biden's floundering campaign. You know, he finished in 5th place in New Hampshire. He did not win the Iowa caucus. It was actually black voters in South Carolina that really kind of disproportionately are the reason why we have Joe Biden as president today. So that's kind of my read here. He's really just trying to fire up his black base. But you know, to your point, Maria, it's absurd. There was an Afghan terrorist who was caught kind of going over our post-Title 42 wide open, porous southern border literally yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. So there are so many other threats here. To do so is deeply cynical, but we should unfortunately expect nothing less from the current Democratic Party and President Joe Biden.
Yeah, and for all the reasons that you just laid out, Douglas Schoen is out with an op-ed in the Journal this morning saying, well, how about Michelle Obama if Joe Biden doesn't run or fails to complete this campaign by the presidency? Former CIA Director, meanwhile, John Brennan, spoke under oath to the Intelligence and the Judiciary Committee last week. Mike Turner is taking depositions on why the 51 spies who lied signed their name on that letter that suggested that the Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. And Mike Turner joined me yesterday, the head of the Intelligence Committee, to talk about what this administration is doing in terms of Americans versus the real threats outside, like China. Here's what the chairman of the Intelligence Committee told me yesterday.
As China tries to get a foothold in our country itself, the FBI, the administration, you know, they've been more interested in saying that Americans are a threat to America than that China is a threat to America.
And here's what he said about the testimony that he's been getting from these folks. He took a deposition from Brennan and Clapper, and he's going through the 51 spies who signed that letter. Watch.
These people signed on to a letter without any evidence whatsoever that there was any Russian intervention or that this was Russia misinformation, solely for the purposes of helping Joe Biden in his debate. We had Brennan, the former CIA director, who, along with Clapper, the head of the ODNI, was one of the big perpetrators of the Russia hoax against the Trump administration, who admitted in his deposition, well, this was just political. Well, what that translates to is that this was just a lie.
So, Josh, there you go. They had to admit it under oath. They just wanted to help Biden win the debate. And that's exactly what Biden did. He used the 51 signatures as proof that Biden's son, Hunter Biden, did not do anything wrong and that he has no knowledge of any business deals.
I mean, Maria, I mean, like, what does it say about the state of the intelligence community? What does it say about the state of the deep state apparatus more broadly that 51 of the nation's highest, most decorated spies were willing to sign on to a letter with no substantive underpinning whatsoever, simply because a couple of Biden campaign operatives, who one of whom, but by the way, happens to be the current Secretary of State, simply literally said in a smoking gun document that I hope sees the light of day soon, literally said, simply because they wanted Joe Biden to have a talking point in a debate with Donald Trump when Trump inevitably brought it up. And by the way, that's actually exactly what happened. When this came up in the second or third presidential debate, when Donald Trump kind of voiced it, Joe Biden said, oh, 50 of the top IC spies have said this is pure Russian disinformation. I mean, talk about circular logic. Talk about kind of, a fallacy in logical reasoning. You literally get people to lie, and then you use the lie to kind of swat down your opponent's debate tactic. The whole thing just stinks to high heaven, frankly. It utterly and completely stinks to high heaven. And, I think that you're totally correct. And Mike Turner is correct to kind of take it back to the origins of the Russia collusion delusion, going back to Michael Flynn in 2016, all this kind of pieces together here. But, from a constitutionalist perspective here, we need to see Antony Blinken, frankly, impeached. I think it is long overdue to see articles of impeachment filed against him here. He is obviously the guy at the center of this. We're not really hearing enough about Antony Blinken himself, I think.
Well, that's true. And, we're going to see potentially a testimony from him, because I know that the House Oversight wants to speak with him, as does Judiciary. Meanwhile, explosive charges yesterday. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer joined me and said that the White House is intimidating informants and whistleblowers, and one of the informants may be missing. Here's what he told me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures. Incredible. Watch.
9 of the 10 people that we've identified that have very good knowledge with respect to the Bidens, they're one of 3 things, Maria. They're either currently in court, they're currently in jail, or they're currently missing. They fear for their lives. Not only are the Biden lawyers and the Biden White House intimidating them, the media is trying to intimidate and discredit them.
Now, Congressman Tim Burchett, who's also on the Oversight Committee, was with me earlier in the program. He confirmed to me that the informant is indeed missing, Josh. This is chilling.
Yeah, so, I watched your interview with Congressman Burchett. I think that the congressman is exactly right, by the way. So if you kind of look at the checks that the legislative branch has on the executive branch, the subpoena power we might think of as a mini check. But, the 2 kind of greater checks that the Constitution's framers gave to Article 1, gave to the Congress, are the power of the purse, which Congressman Burchett, I think, accurately alluded to, and then also what I just alluded to in the context of Antony Blinken, which is the impeachment power. So, those are the basic tools right now at Congress's disposal when the executive branch is being completely uncooperative, as the case currently appears to be here. But, look, if you kind of step back from the minutia a little bit and try to analyze this from a slightly broader perspective, Maria, what is actually going on here? You and I both know exactly what is going on here, which is this is Hunter Biden, who obviously is at the epicenter of all of this. Hunter Biden and, the rest of kind of the Biden crime family, James Biden, the brothers, the uncles, but Hunter really in particular here. And what they are doing, what everyone kind of at the top of the IC community, with the White House, the FBI, Chris Wray, what they are all doing right now is they are pulling out all the stops imaginable to hide the president of the United States' personal family from getting possible public scrutiny. And it's all in the backdrop, obviously, of Biden's re-election campaign, which is already floundering. The polls are already not good. We saw that Washington Post ABC poll just last week. The last thing that Biden and Kamala Harris want is yet another headache, yet another episode with Hunter Biden here. So, that is what is going on here. But, again, to kind of get back to your interview with Congressman Burchett, I think that Congress would be remiss if they did not consider full and forthright use of the entirety of all the tools the Constitution's framers gave them. And that very much includes threats to defund agencies and ultimately the impeachment power if need be.
It looks like that's all they've got, Josh. We'll keep watching that and keep a spotlight on all of it. Thanks very much for weighing in. Josh Hammer joining us this morning.